So you think. Real quick, we're going to go through the rules again, but first off, when we call your line group, and it's on the cardstock ticket that we hole punched with a pretty little star, when you came in, you're going to walk out the front door and then take an immediate right, and there'll be ushers, and you're going to get under the barrel house, through the barrel house to get your book signed, and then back out. Now, Neil will be signing as many copies of The Ocean at the End of the Lane as you have. And one other item. One of those items will be personalized. You should flap your books and have a post-it note, which my colleagues have. We'll also have them in line. No flash photography. Please turn the flashes off on your cameras or your phone now. No flash photography during the event or during the signing. As you can see up there on the Join the Conversation, there's our Twitter handles, Facebook, Neil's, John's, the Grand Reserve, etc. So please feel free to tweet at us, near us, with us, and use the hashtag Gaiman Lexington if you like.
While you're in the signing line, please have your camera ready to go. So you can snap pictures in the signing line. There will be no post photography, anything like that. So snap your picture as you're coming through. Have it ready. We will have somebody who will take a picture of you getting your book signed by Neil. So have it ready. If you're fumbling for it, we gotta go. There are a lot of people here. We don't want to be mean or rude or anything like that to you guys, but we also got to get everybody through in a timely manner. Because it's going to be late, and I missed my nap time today. So, it's fair.
Who is it?
Post-it notes for personalization, so if you need one, hit them up. All right. Good evening. Welcome. I'm not Neil, so relax. So, one of the best parts about being an indie bookseller is that you make friends. And when I moved here about 5 years ago from DC, and I was immediately shocked, not just by how many readers there are in this area, but by the incredible depth of talent of writers that are from here and live here. Yeah, it's amazing. And one of who is a dear personal friend of people I know, and an amazingly talented author, and even more exciting and impressive to me than his talent is this is a gentleman, an author, who stands up for independent bookselling, stands up for the rights of authors, stands up for readers, and is just an incredibly important voice in books today. We are incredibly lucky to have him writing and coming to our stores and talking about his work and talking about the works of others. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. John Scalzi.
Yay, indeed. Thank you. You are not here to see me, but you get me anyway. I'm like the prize in the Cracker Jacks box. That is Neil Gaiman. Now, I'm here to introduce Neil Gaiman, and in one sense, there's absolutely no chance that any of you do not know who Neil Gaiman is because, you're here. You know him as a writer, you know him as an internet celebrity, you know him as the guy who's kind of sexy in that British, yes, I used to be the basis for Echo and the Bunnymen sort of way, right? You know all this about it, so, frankly, giving you a rundown of his history is kind of pointless at this point. I assume you know why you're here and who you are here for. So instead, let me give you a personal history of me and Neil Gaiman because I think this will be kind of fun. It's 1990, and I am subletting a room at University of Chicago from my friend Joe Schmidt, who says that as a condition of me subletting the room, I actually have to read comic books because he's a huge comic nerd. And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. And so, so I spent that entire summer in forced reading. And I remember reading Concrete and reading Constantine and reading all this other stuff, but the one that stuck with me was this one about this lanky sort of Robert Smith-looking dude who was all moody called Sandman. And that's my first introduction to Neil. It was required summer reading by my friend Joe Schmidt. It's now 1992 or 93, and I've burned through all of Sandman and read as much of Neil Gaiman's stuff as I could, and I'm working at a newspaper, and I'm like, I want to actually talk to this Neil Gaiman person. And so I pitch a story to my editor about these wacky things called graphic novels, how all the kids love them. So maybe I could do an interview with like one of these guys writes, I don't know, this Neil Gaiman guy, I don't know. And so he says, fine. So I call up DC and we arrange this interview. And for like 40 minutes, I talked to Neil Gaiman about, comic books and about life, about art and all this sort of stuff. And I remember it for years and years and years and years. And of course, he forgets at the moment that he puts the phone down because he's Neil Gaiman at the time. Years later, I would tell him about this. He's like, oh, okay. It's 2003. I am at my very first World Science Fiction Convention, my very first Worldcon, which is also my very first science fiction convention. And it's up in Toronto. I have heard that Neil's going to be here. And I'm kind of excited. I'd like to meet him. And then all of a sudden people go, it's Neil, it's Neil, it's Neil. And all of a sudden, here comes Neil, dressed in black, with black accents. Walking down the hall, surrounded by gorgeous women, who knew? Trailing a commentary trail of young gothlets. So many people dressed like death. It is now 2006, and I'm nominated for a Campbell Award, which I think is really super awesome cool. And I thought that's great, because it's, for my first book, Old Men's War, this is going to be awesome. Thank you. A couple days later, I get another email from the Worldcon people, where they go, oh, we forgot to tell you, your book is also nominated for Best Novel. I'm like, well, that's kind of not a trivial thing. You could have told me at the time. Much later, I learned that the reason that was told a little bit later was that there was a book that was on the list that had been nominated. And the author decided, you know what, I've won enough of these for right now. I think it's time to let someone else get the benefit of these things. That was Anansi Boys, and the writer was Neil Gaiman. When I first met Neil Gaiman in 2009, this is the first thing I said to him. I owe you a fruit basket. 2009, I meet Neil for the first time. We have so many friends in common that when we finally meet each other, it's like, we have nothing to say to each other because we already know everybody and everybody knows us, and we've just kind of like, oh, hi. It was the start of a beautiful friendship. 2012, and this is the final thing before I get you to Neil. I'm writing on my Twitter feed. I'm getting close to about 30,000 people on my Twitter feed. And I make the joke on my Twitter feed that if I get to 30,000 people, I will strip naked and put, buttercream frosting all over myself and then photograph it. Normally this would go unremarked. Unless, of course, somebody retweets it. And they have 1.8 million followers. And their name is Neil Gaiman. So immediately my Twitter numbers start skyrocketing up. And I immediately send Neil this letter, or a note saying, Neil, you bastard. If I hit 30,000 people, I'm stripping naked and being covered in buttercream frosting on your front yard. If you're a normal person, this would be where you back away from me slowly. But Neil tweets, that would be lovely. And then Lorraine, his assistant, says, oh, and I know some roller derby girls who would be happy to do it for you. And thus it was, in August of 2012, that I found myself on Neil Gaiman's front lawn, covered in buttercream frosting. I honestly don't remember much. But I do remember Neil slapping the final piece of frosting in my mouth, which I thought was strangely symbolic. Neil has been someone who I've admired for years and years and years, not only because he's just a fabulous writer, but because he is genuinely a good person. I never would have imagined that I would get to call him my friend. I never imagined that we would do wacky, crazy things. I never imagined that I would be able to introduce him in front of all you people who are going to have such a wonderful time with him tonight. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Neil Gaiman.
You are sitting down, and B, everybody can see. Thank you, John. That was wonderful. That, normally, the introduction bit is the bit of this that you kind of endure. If you're the author. And a really nice lady from the bookstore who really didn't know who you were before she went to your webpage gets up there and says, he has won 4 Hugo Awards, 3 Nebulas, a Bram Stoker Award, and 3 and lots of other awards. So I think that was my favorite introduction ever, because no other introductions have had people naked, covered with buttercream on my front lawn. The second best was on the American Gods UK tour, where I was in Waterstones in Manchester, and the young man who was going to be introducing me was terrified. And I could tell that he was terrified because he was shaking, and he was holding the speech. Looked exactly like a piece of paper that just vanished. Yeah, it was that big, and it was shaking. And he was shaking nervously, and he explained that he'd stayed up for the past 36 hours doing nothing but writing his introduction to me. And I said, you know, honestly, they all know who I am. You know, you don't honestly have to probably say much more than you know who he is, you know why you're here, and you get away with it. He said, no, I've been working on this for 2 days, and it's just me and an awful lot of coffee, and I think I've got everything in here, and it's going to be great. And the thing is in an old church. He goes up to the lectern in the church, and I think, this is going to be interesting. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, you know who he is, you know why you're here. And it was beautiful. So, hello, this is the penultimate stop on Neil Gaiman Held Hostage. And it's wonderful to see you all, it's wonderful to be here. I'd like to thank Joseph-Beth bookstore for their hospitality in having me in. And this is going to be a lot like all of the other ones that I've done, except that in the middle of it, John Scalzi will appear like a creature from your worst nightmares, like the Inquisitor of Doom, armed with a stack of questions from you lot, and he will inquisit me. And I will give honest answers to impertinent questions. It will be brilliant. I was pleased, he sort of showed me a rough thumb through the stack of questions from you lot, and I was pleased to see the question that for some reason had come up. The last 2 stops was missing, which actually left me worrying both about the people of Chicago and the people of Nashville. Because in each of those 2 stops, somebody had asked me, why all the sex in your books? Which left me in the kind of awkward, embarrassing position of going, obviously these people were missing out on something well. When a man loves a lady, special kind of rhythmic hug. All of you who are here today probably resulted from one of those. Best laugh. Okay, so the plan, and I do have one. This is not the chaotic Neil Gaiman gets up here and rambles in an incredibly tired fashion that it probably seems to you. There is a plan. I'm going to read from this book. It is called The Ocean at the End of the Lane. And before I read from it, I should explain why it exists. I don't normally have to do that with books. Because normally, when books exist, they exist because at some point I went, you know what? I think I'm going to write this book. And then I do. Sometimes it takes a long time. But I sit down and I go, I think I will write a book called American Gods. And it will be a big, thick book. It will be filled with gods, and it'll have this sort of war, and it'll go off, and it'll be a road trip, and it'll have all of the stuff in America that I don't understand. And it will be the size and shape of a brick, and this will be my book. And that's one way that I set out to write a book. Or I might go, I'm going to write a book called The Graveyard Book. And it will be constructed, in 8 chapters that will be short stories set 2 years apart, and they will form an arc, and it will become a novel, and they will be like The Jungle Book, only where The Jungle Book is about a kid who wanders into the jungle and is brought up by jungle beasts and taught all the things that wild animals know. This will be about somebody who wanders into a graveyard as a baby and is brought up by dead people and taught all the things that dead people know. And that will be my book. And that was how I always wrote books in the past. That was not how I wrote this book. This book began with me going, I miss my wife. My wife, thank you, that was a very nice and I did. She'd gone off to Melbourne, Australia to make an album called Theatre is Evil. And she was writing, she had lots of songs, but she was finishing off writing them. She was rehearsing the band, she was recording the thing, and I was off in Florida because it was January and the alternative was being in Wisconsin. And I was missing her an awful lot. And I thought, I will write a short story and I'll send it to her. And then she'll remember me. No, it wasn't a bad thing. She was just, she gets the same way making an album, I discovered, that I do normally when I'm writing a book, which is you just become a driven monomaniac with no room for anything else in your life. So I had a wife who was this wonderful, driven monomaniac making her album. And I thought, well, I'll send her a short story. And she'll like that. And it'll be a nice gesture. And she doesn't like fantasy very much. But there are things she does like, and I thought I would put them in here. She likes me. She likes honesty. She likes knowing how people work. She likes feelings. I'd never really done the feelings thing before, being male and English. But I thought, I can do that. I'll put all that stuff in my short story for her and she will like it. And I will send it to her. And I started writing my short story. And then I carried on writing my short story. I carried on writing my short story some more. And then, moving up one notch on the list of things you can be eligible for in the Hugo Awards, I decided I was now writing a novelette. They were a bit longer than short stories and definitely shorter than novellas. And I kept writing this thing until I had exceeded the novelette word count. And now I was writing a novella. And that is really problematic because nobody knows how to publish novellas. When you're doing a novella, you're doomed. And I sent a really apologetic email to my editors saying, writing a novella, sorry. And I carried on writing the thing. And then I finished it. I finished it in Dallas, where Amanda had come to mix her album. And I flew in, and every day she would go off and mix her album, and every night I'd read her what I'd typed up that day. And at the end of the Dallas trip, I finished typing the book, and I did a word count. And I sent another email off to my editors on each side of the Atlantic, which said, appear to have written a novel. Sorry. So that was how this book came into existence. It is not the sensible, normal way that books come into existence. You're meant to at least go, I'm writing a novel, and then you write a novel, and instead you're me, and you muck it all up. And that's what I'm going to read to you from. And let me have a show of hands. How many of you have read this already at this point? Oh, it's getting good. By the end of the tour, I will be able to pick and choose freely from anywhere in the novel, but right now I'm still, there's enough of you who haven't read it when we stick pretty close to the beginning. I've only cheated once, last night in Nashville, because there was a thunderstorm. And there's a scene where it gets all thundery and scary, and I thought I have to. And then we got perfect, but absolutely perfectly timed magical thunderclaps at the right, sort of like that. Only with actual thunder. At exactly the right moments, and it was magic. Let's see. So, our narrator is 7 years old. And he's just found, he and his father have found somebody, a family lodger, has committed suicide in the, that's fine, committed suicide in a car at the end of their lane. And he's met 3 women who live at the end of the lane. And they are, it's going to be really irritating. I guess we're just going to have to make the best of it, aren't we? Or we could kill them. Make the best of it, kill them. You know, the question is, if all of us did it, it would be like Murder on the Orient Express. You know, and we'd all be on there, and we'd go, well, yes, we all killed them, but you have to spread this amongst 1,000 people. We each collected 1,000 for the killing, and they go, oh, okay, well then, don't do it again. So, he's met 3 mysterious women at the bottom of the lane. He's, something weird has happened. A person has killed himself, and now he's having bad dreams. Just so you know, I'm not ever been one for that whole sort of, well, no one rid me of this turbulent priest thing. Anyone in this room kills those people. I personally will not blame you. Obviously, I'm not saying do it. We are against murder, aren't we? We think that murder is a bad thing.
Murder's bad, but death happens.
So he's just had, our 7-year-old has just had a very bad dream. I woke and I was choking. I could not breathe. There was something in my throat, hard and sharp and stopping me from breathing or from crying out. I began to cough as I woke, tears streaming down my cheeks, nose running. I pushed my fingers as deeply as I could into my mouth, desperate and panicked and determined. With the tip of my forefinger, I felt the edge of something hard. I put the middle finger on the other side of it, choking myself, clamping the thing between them, and I pulled whatever it was out of my throat. I gasped for breath, and then I half vomited onto my bed sheets, threw up a clear drool flecked with blood from where the thing had cut my throat as I pulled it out. I did not look at the thing. It was tight in my hand, slimy with my saliva and my phlegm. I did not want to look at it. I did not want it to exist, the bridge between my dream and the waking world. I ran down the hallway to the bathroom, down at the far end of the house. I washed my mouth out, drank directly from the cold tap, spat red into the white sink. Only when I'd done that did I sit on the side of the white bathtub and open my hand. I was scared. But what was in my hand, what had been in my throat, wasn't scary. It was only a coin, a silver shilling. I went back to the bedroom. I dressed myself, cleaned the vomit from my sheets as best I could with a damp face flannel. I hoped that the sheets would dry before I had to sleep in the bed that night. Then I went downstairs. I wanted to tell someone about the shilling, but I did not know who to tell. I knew enough about adults to know that if I did tell them what had happened, I would not be believed. Adults rarely seem to believe me when I told the truth anyway. Why would they believe me about something so unlikely? My sister was playing in the back garden with some of her friends. She ran over to me angrily when she saw me. She said, "I hate you. I'm telling Mommy and Daddy when they come home." "What?" "You know," she said. "I know it was you." "What was me? Throwing coins at me, at all of us from the bushes? That was just nasty." "But I didn't. It hurt." She went back to her friends, and they all glared at me. My throat felt painful and ragged. I walked down the drive. I don't know where I was thinking of going. I just didn't want to be there any longer. Letty Hempstock was standing at the bottom of the drive, beneath the chestnut trees. She looked as if she'd been waiting for 100 years and could wait for another 100. She wore a white dress, but the light coming through the chestnut's young spring leaves stained it green. I said, "Hello." She said, "You were having bad dreams, weren't you?" I took the shilling out of my pocket and showed it to her. "I was choking on it," I told her, "when I woke up, but I don't know how it got into my mouth. If someone had put it into my mouth, I would have woken up. It was just in there when I woke." "Yes," she said. "My sister says I threw coins at them from the bushes, but I didn't." "No," she said, "you didn't." I said, "Letty, what's happening?" "Oh," she said, as if it was obvious. "Someone's just trying to give people money, that's all. But it's doing it very badly, and it's stirring things up around here that should be asleep, and that's not good." "Is it something to do with the man who died?" "Something to do with him, yes." "Is he doing this?" She shook her head. Then she said, "Have you had breakfast?" I shook my head. "Well then," she said, "come on." We walked down the lane together. There were a few houses down the lane here and there back then, and she pointed to them as we went past. "In that house," said Letty Hempstock, "a man dreamed of being sold and of being turned into money. Now he started seeing things in mirrors. What kinds of things? Himself, but with fingers poking out of his eye sockets and things coming out of his mouth, like crab claws. I thought about people with crab legs coming out of their mouths in mirrors. Why did I find a shilling in my throat? He wanted people to have money. The opal miner who died in the car. Yes, well, sort of, not exactly. He started all this off like someone lighting a fuse on a firework. His death lit the touch paper. The thing that's exploding right now, that isn't him. That's somebody else. Something else. She rubbed her freckled nose with a grubby hand. Lady's gone mad in that house, she told me, and it would not have occurred to me to doubt her. She has money in the mattress. Now she won't get out of bed in case someone takes it from her. How do you know? She shrugged. Once you've been around for a bit, you get to know stuff. I kicked a stone. By a bit, do you mean a really long time? She nodded. How old are you, really? I asked. 11. I thought for a bit. Then I asked, how long have you been 11 for? She smiled at me. We walked past Caraway Farm, the farmers, whom one day I would come to know as Callie and his parents, were standing in their farmyard, shouting at each other. They stopped when they saw us. When we rounded a bend in the lane and were out of sight, Letty said, those poor people. Why are they poor people? Because they've been having money problems. And this morning, he had a dream where she was doing bad things to make money. So he looked in her handbag and found lots of folded up 10-shilling notes. She says she doesn't know where they came from, and he doesn't believe her. He doesn't know what to believe. All of the fighting and the dreams, it's about money, isn't it? I'm not sure, said Letty. And she seemed so grown up then that I was almost scared of her. Whatever's happening, she said eventually, it can all be sorted out. She saw the expression on my face then, worried, scared even. And she said, after pancakes. Letty cooked us pancakes on a big metal griddle on the kitchen stove. They were paper thin, and as each pancake was done, Letty would squeeze lemon onto it and plop a blob of plum jam onto the center and roll it tightly, like a cigar. When there were enough, we sat at the kitchen table and wolfed them down. There was a hearth in that kitchen, and there were ashes still smouldering in the hearth from the night before. That kitchen was a friendly place, I thought. I said to Letty, I'm scared. She smiled at me. I'll make sure you're safe, I promise. I'm not scared. I was still scared, but not as much. It's just scary. I said I promise, said Letty Hempstock. I won't let you be hurt. Hurt? Said a high, cracked voice. Who's hurt? What's hurt? Why would anybody be hurt? It was old Mrs. Hempstock, her apron held between her hands, and in the hollow of the apron, so many daffodils that the light reflected up from them transformed her face to gold, and the kitchen seemed bathed in yellow light. Letty said, something's causing trouble. It's giving people money in their dreams and in real life. She showed the old lady my shilling. My friend found himself choking on this shilling when he woke up this morning. Old Mrs. Hempstock put her apron on the kitchen table, rapidly moved the daffodils off the cloth and onto the wood. Then she took the shilling from Letty. She squinted at it, sniffed it, rubbed at it, listened to it, or put it to her ear, at any rate, and then she touched it with the tip of her purple tongue. It's new, she said at last. It says 1912 on it, but it didn't exist yesterday. Letty said, I knew there was something funny about it. I looked up at old Mrs. Hempstock. How do you know? Good question, lovey. It's electron decay, mostly. You have to look at things closely to see the electrons. They're the little dinky ones that look like tiny smiles. The neutrons are the grey ones that look like frowns. The electrons were all a bit too smiley for 1912. So then I checked the size of the letters in the old king's head, and everything was a tad too sharp and crisp. Even when they were worn, it was as if they'd been made to be worn. You must have very good eyesight, I told her. I was impressed. She gave me back the coin. Not as good as it once was, but then when you get to be my age, your eyesight won't be as sharp as it once was, neither. And she let out a guffaw, as if she'd said something very funny. How old is that? Letty looked at me, and I was worried that I'd said something rude. Sometimes adults didn't like to be asked their ages, and sometimes they did. In my experience, old people did. They were proud of their ages. Old Mrs. Hempstock went over to a cupboard and took out several colourful vases. Old enough, she said. I remember when the moon was made. Hasn't there always been a moon? Bless you, not in the slightest. I remember the day the moon came. We looked up in the sky. It was all dirty brown and sooty grey here, then not green and blue. She half filled each of the vases at the sink. Then she took a pair of blackened kitchen scissors and snipped off the bottom half-inch of stem from each of the daffodils. I said, are you sure it's not that man's ghost doing this? Are you sure we aren't being haunted? They both laughed then, the girl and the old woman, and I felt stupid. I said, sorry. Ghosts can't make things, said Letty. They aren't even good at moving things. Old Mrs. Hempstock said, go and get your mother. She's doing laundry. Then to me, you shall help me with the daffs. I helped her put the flowers into the vases, and she asked my opinion on where to put the vases in the kitchen. We placed the vases where I suggested, and I felt wonderfully important. The daffodils sat like patches of sunlight, making that dark wooden kitchen even more cheerful. The floor was made of red and grey flagstones. The walls were whitewashed. The old woman gave me a lump of honeycomb from the Hempstock's own beehive on a chipped saucer and poured a little cream over it from a jug. I ate it with a spoon, chewing the wax like gum, letting the honey flow into my mouth, sweet and sticky with an aftertaste of wildflowers. I was scraping the last of the cream and honey from the saucer when Letty and her mother came into the kitchen. Mrs. Hempstock still had big Wellington boots on, and she strode in as if she were in an enormous hurry. Mother, she said, giving the boy honey, you'll rot his teeth. Old Mrs. Hempstock shrugged. I'll have a word with the wigglers in his mouth, she said. Get them to leave his teeth alone. You can't just boss bacteria around like that, said the younger Mrs. Hempstock. They don't like it. Stuff and silliness, said the old lady. You leave wigglers alone and they'll be carrying on like anything. Show them who's boss and they can't do enough for you. You've tasted my cheese. She turned to me. I want medals for my cheese. Medals. Back in the old king's day, there were those who'd ride for a week to buy a round of my cheese. They said that the king himself had it with his bread, and his boys, Prince Dickon and Prince Geoffrey, and even little Prince John, they swore it was the finest cheese they had ever tasted. Gran, said Letty, and the old lady stopped mid-flow. Letty's mother said, you'll be needing a hazel wand, and, she added somewhat doubtfully, I suppose you could take the lad. It's his coin and it'll be easier to carry if he's with you. Something she made. She, said Letty. She was holding her horn-handled penknife with the blade closed. Taste like a she, said Letty's mother. I might be wrong, mind. Don't take the boy, said old Mrs. Hempstock. Asking for trouble, that is. I was disappointed. We'll be fine, said Letty. I'll take care of him. Him and me. It'll be an adventure, and he'll be company. Please, Gran? I looked up at old Mrs. Hempstock with hope on my face, and waited. Don't say I didn't warn you if it all goes wobbly, said old Mrs. Hempstock. Thank you, Gran. I won't. And I'll be careful. Old Mrs. Hempstock sniffed. Now, don't do anything stupid. Approach it with care. Bind it, close its ways, and send it back to sleep. I know, said Letty. I know all that, honestly. We'll be fine. That's what she said. But we weren't. to stand around here. Let's stand together, because really there's just one chair. You get to be Mr. Interlocutor.
Right.
Stand far enough away that we don't...
I don't know if you've ever met me before. My name is John Scalzi.
Do you have the questions on you, Mr. Scalzi?
I do have the questions on me.
Have they been certified as proper questions?
They do. They have question marks and everything. But before I get to their questions, as a point of privilege, I get to ask my question first. And I get to ask an esoteric question because I'm all smart like that. And my question, without giving any spoilers, there is a line...
Hang on. If anybody has the ability to just turn down these mics ever so slightly so they don't do the squeaky feedback.
Squeaky feedback?
Could you make that happen?
Yes. Otherwise, I'll just wander around out there. No, that...
Okay. Good. Little squeaky feedback.
Okay, there we go. There's a line in this book that you just wrote, which says, paraphrasing more or less, that it's difficult or troublesome to be a door. And it seems to me that creative people are doors, that they write, and through their writing or through their imaginings, people see ghosts or gods or aliens or spaceships, and people want to continue, want to go through those doors. People want to be on the other side of those doors. So speaking as somebody who is a door, is it difficult to be a door?
What a lovely question.
Why, yes, it is.
I've been getting more and more fascinated recently by the idea of escapism, and by the idea of escapism as a bad thing. Because when you're writing a book like this, you get to think a lot more than you normally do about the idea of books as escape, as places. The idea that a book is a real place that you can go, which is something I think the readers, the giant community of readers gets to experience. When I was a kid, if things were bad, if things were dull, if things were weird, it was okay. I had places I could go that were safe, that were familiar. I could go to Narnia. I could go to Oz. I could go and hang out with Mary Poppins. It's all the kind of stuff that you could do. And then when I was a little older, it was good because I could go to Middle-earth. There are places you can go, and you go to those places. And then as you grow older, people start talking about escapism as if it's a very, very bad thing. As if somehow it's the teeth-rotting Coca-Cola of your diet rather than the nutritious greens, and that really you should be reading works of literature which are good for you and definitely do not offer escape in any possible way. In fact, proper works of literature should remind you that you are here, trapped in a miserable place. And if you are miserable, that's okay, because maybe you will feel slightly better because the people in the book will be in the world that you're in, only they'll be a little bit more miserable than you are. And escapism, the idea that you're giving somebody somewhere good to go is frowned on. And as I get older and older, I think, I really am a huge fan of escapism. I'm actually with Tolkien, I'm with C.S. Lewis, those guys where they were saying that the only people who really sound off against escape, who really don't like escape, are jailers. And that escape is a good thing. And I think escape is much more of an important thing than that, because while I was trying to explain this to some people in Miami, I thought, the big important thing actually is not that you escape. It's the fact that you go away and you wind up with tools, and you wind up with weapons, and you wind up with knowledge that you didn't have before. That there are things you didn't know. And yes, you've escaped, but when you come back armed. You come back protected. You come back safer and saner. You come back with a new perspective on the world that you're in. And so, is it a troubling thing to be a door? Yes and no. It can be a grumpy thing to be a door, and it can be a frustrating thing to be a door. But at the end of the day, if what you've done is create a number of places that wouldn't have existed without you, that become places that people can go and can come back safer, better, braver, happier than they were when they left, then I think being a door is the best thing in the world.
This question sort of almost feeds into that. It says, I admire how you pull the hidden places into the everyday world. When you go on walks, do you find yourself looking for these places?
No. What I tend to do is I except when I was doing graveyard book research, when I would just make a point wherever I was of going to the local graveyard and wandering around. And I remember the point where I started noticing that in every single graveyard there'd always be this one really grotty grave on which you had a thing that wasn't really an angel anymore. It wasn't even a weeping angel, it was just a thing. And I went, I think these are ghoul gates. And that time I went looking and I found something. But normally what I tend to do is ideas turn up at the moment you're not looking for them. Ideas tend to turn up in two different ways. Either I will just be daydreaming, and I'll be walking, or I'll be driving, or I'll be going from place to place, and I will see something, and my mind will wander, and suddenly I will realize that actually the tree that I just drove past was Yggdrasil, the world tree, and that's what it looks like. And suddenly I'm building something in my head. Or the point where you're driving in the winter up in the Midwest, and you realize that the snow blowing across the road looks like snakes. And you start wondering what it would be like if there were snakes of snow across the road. And it never actually turns into a story. It's always this little thing when I'm driving and stuff. So either it's just you're thinking about something else and it turns up, or you're working on something else. And it's like people say, well, what is the best place to get ideas, the best way to get ideas? And the answer is to write something different, because then you wind up with things you can't use. And that's really the point where an idea turns up and goes, me, look at me, I'm so clever. And you go, yeah, I can't write. Doing something else.
Why do you like to use female trios in your books? E.g., the Hempstocks, the Zoria sisters, the women of past, present, and future, and from the American Gods.
I have no imagination.
How do you think social media, Twitter, Tumblr, etc., has made an impact or increased your popularity, and any upcoming projects using social media like your 12 Stories BlackBerry project? Actually,
the next thing I'm planning to do from social media is take a holiday from it.
You can't do that!
It is my first half of 2014 plan, is to do a sort of social media and electronica vacation while I go off and work on some stuff, which I think would be nice, because I've done one of those in ages. And that was nice, and then you come back refreshed, and everybody either goes, we missed you, or they go, Twitter? Oh, nobody does that anymore. Oh my God, we're all on this thing now, where we just sort of post these 1-second videos of ourselves screaming. It's all anybody does now.
It's Screamer spelled S-C-R-E-M-R.
Yeah, Screamer, yeah. Okay. And suddenly I have to decide, am I going to sign up for this new platform of 1-second videos of me screaming?
Now That was only half a second, do better.
It could catch on. If there are any venture capitalists in the room, see John afterwards.
What advice would you give to public school teachers to foster creativity in their students?
Great
A lot of teachers out there.
So, in my experience, the one group of people who do not need creativity being fostered is kids. Kids are really good at creating. Kids, give them a piece of paper, they'll do your drawing. They won't go, no, I'm really not an artist. They go, yeah, cool. This is a house, and there's a kangaroo in the house. And kids, you know, say, make me up a song, they'll make you up a song. Make me up a story, they'll go and make up a story. It's the best thing about kids, I think, is that nobody has squashed them yet. And the biggest thing that I would want from all teachers is not to squash them. You know, that it's very, very easy as a kid to be squashed. All you need to do is show your drawing that you're really, really proud of to the wrong person, who will look at it and say, look, kangaroos don't go on the roof. Doesn't look like a kangaroo anyway. And you go, oh, I get it. People don't like me drawing. And you stop. So, biggest piece of advice in terms of the fostering of creativity is just encourage, especially encouraging kids. And the other one, I'd say, which is sort of feeds into that in a weird kind of way, is there is no such thing as bad literature for kids. Every now and again, somebody will decide that I, because I've won the Newbery Medal and I'm fancy and stuff, should like say something against, I don't know, Goosebumps or whatever. And whatever the thing of the day that kids are reading because they're enjoying it, that people think they shouldn't be reading, and they should be reading things that are much closer to good, healthy green vegetables. And I try to explain that there's no wrong way into literature. There's no wrong way to discover that you like reading. There's no wrong way to discover you like stories. And if you're a kid, it doesn't matter that whatever you're being shown is old and hackneyed and rubbish and you've done a million times before, because that doesn't matter, because this is the first time you're seeing it. And for you, it's new, and it's exciting, and it's magic. So don't squash people. And last thing, don't, for God's sake, do what I did with my daughter Holly when she was about 11 and said, I love these Goosebumps books. They're great. They're like scary and everything. They're fantastic. Do not go, if you like that, I got something you'll love. Go down to the library and come back with a copy of Carrie. Holly spent the entire rest of her teenage years reading nothing books, reading nothing but happy stories in which people go across the plains in covered wagons. And she still glares at me if I mention Stephen King's name. It's true.
This dovetails spectacularly into this next question. You mentioned in the acknowledgments of Ocean at the End of the Lane that Stephen King reminded you of the joy of writing. Would you care to elaborate on those conversations with the fabulous Mr. King, my second favorite author? Thank you.
I was asked in about January of last year to go and interview, if I would like to interview Stephen King, and I was asked by an editor that I really, really liked. And it was an old friend. So I said yes. And I was in Florida anyway, so I just drove across to Sarasota, where Steve was living, where they do the winters. And the first thing he said when he saw me was, "Why did you do this?" He said, "I gave them a list of people I would be willing to be interviewed by, knowing that all of you were too busy." And I said, I did it because I was asked by my friend Kathy from the Sunday Times. And we go way back. She wrote me this letter, and I said I couldn't turn it down. He said, Interestingly, by the time I handed in the article, 4 days later, she'd been fired. I know, that was how I felt. But it meant that I got to spend a couple of days with the Kings in Sarasota, and Joe Hill was also there. And I've known Joe since he was about 20 and looked just as clonally like his father.
It's scary, isn't it?
I have a theory, which is, instead of being born the natural way, at some point, Steve probably accidentally cut off one of his fingers and just dropped it in the vat. And at some point, little Joe Hill came crawling. Yeah. So and it was great. We spent, it was meant to be an interview, but really it was just mostly us talking about writing, of which a fraction got into the thing. And a lot of it was just talking to Steve about how his writing process, and how he's built a life in which fundamentally he is happy because he writes. And I loved that. I loved the idea of, he's at his desk by about 8, he's done for the day by midday, and as long as he's done his 6 pages, he's completely happy. Anything else can happen in the day, and it's fine, because he's happy.
Another quick question from me. Were you aware that when you were speaking your story earlier, when the music was going, you were reading to the beat?
No, was I? Excellent. Probably. I've noticed that I do that in Australia several times. I've actually done readings with string quartets playing in the background. And I find that gets really weird, because after a while you just sort of start finding the beats and finding the ways the beats match the patterns of what you're reading, and things sort of spring and bounce and get really kind of odd. It's awesome.
What do you
I still hope they're going to die. I decided that murder, even if spread amongst 1,000 people, is a bad thing. There is no justification for it. I'm now thinking about sinkholes. Those ones that open underneath you, and maybe in this case, could close up again. Vanish, close up.
Hot mics. Another one. What do you have in your pockets?
What does it have in its pockets? An awful lot of the stuff in its pockets now is things that people have handed me on this tour that I haven't yet done anything with. Here is a movie on a chip by somebody named Devon Avery, and I've not yet taken the chip and put it into anything. I've got, yesterday, somebody gave me this, which is a Liberty Head dollar from 1922, the one that I talk about in American Gods. And it's the most beautiful example of the thing. So if any of you, I'll stick it up wherever I'm signing. And that way, if any of you who've ever read American Gods and wondered what the Liberty Head dollar, that also looks like Zoria Polonochnaya, looks like, then I will show you. So it's stuff. It's weird stuff. It gets weirder.
Speaking of American Gods, why did you choose Rock City as the site of climax to American Gods?
Because when I set off, tactical nuclear weapon. I mean, they talk about, these suitcase bombs. A little brief just something very small. What we want here is a mousetrap. Just, I was driving from the Minneapolis area to Florida to write American Gods for the very, very first time, and I had promised myself I would not take any freeways. So I was driving weird back routes, and in those days you didn't have magical devices in your pocket with maps on you on them that showed where you were. You had to write to the AAA and say, I'm going to be making this journey. And by the way, I don't want to go on any freeways. And they would send you back something that thick, a book for each state and a giant map showing you where you could go and how you would do it. And I took that map, except where I ignored it and just decided to follow road signs. And so I was on some very, very strange road through some very, very strange mountains. Somewhere probably relatively near here, as these things go. And I looked down, and below me I could see a barn. And painted on the barn was Sea Rock City, the world's wonder. And I thought, what is Rock City, the world's wonder? Whatever it is, it must be very close. And as I drove through back ways, every now and again I would see another sign. And I think I drove for a good day and a half, until I got to Chattanooga and went, I have to see Rock City. And then I discovered it is impossible, if you don't actually know what you're doing, to get off at the exit for Chattanooga and follow the signs to Rock City and get to Rock City. Because despite having put up brilliant stealth barns all over America, telling you to go and see it, the idea of actually signposting the way to Rock City from the Rock City exit has not yet occurred to anybody. You would think, but it hasn't. But I did. I went to Rock City and I walked around it and I went, this appears to be exactly the thing that I'm talking about in my book. I had this idea that the holiest places in America would all be the kinds of places where tourists would turn up in enormous quantities and not know why they were there. And they'd walk around it, and then nobody would be quite sure at the end what they'd seen or why they were there. And they wouldn't walk away happy. They'd walk away with this sort of puzzle, what the fuck was that about? And the tourists moving through these attractions would be like water on a prayer wheel, gradually accumulating power to these places. So that was my idea. And I think it was the point where I encountered the black-lit fairyland characters that I went, good, my head just broke, I'm putting this is going in my book. So that was one. Let's do the last question, and then I may try and read something else. Mr. Gaiman, in the conservatory, with the technical utility,
the final question. Sorry, my brain just went the final countdown. How do you balance your personal relationships while finding time to write? Or you could read this as, how do I get my girlfriend to think I'm not ignoring her when I write or draw? Dude.
You're doomed. I had spent my entire life trying to train my loved ones into understanding that I am working when I am staring out of the window. I am 52. I've been a professional writer for over 30 years now. I've made no progress on this. If I am sitting staring off blankly into space, people assume I am not doing anything. And how do you do it? I don't know. I tend to run away. I have now become somebody who's expert at sidling over to friends who have more houses than they have bodies and saying, "You're not using that house, are you? Can I just sort of, I wouldn't mind if somebody just sort of nipped in and wrote a book quickly." It doesn't work, and you know, what I tend to do is just do things that work in terms of space. I have in the Midwest, I have a gazebo down in the woods. I've been told it's technically not a gazebo because the windows are filled in, but it is my gazebo. And I go there, and it's just out of reach of the house's Wi-Fi, which is brilliant. And it's just far enough away from the house that if somebody turns up there to talk to me or do something and they're not carrying a cup of tea for me, they will at least get glared at. And so that's actually a good way of doing it for me. But now, you know, with having a new relationship, getting married, and with Amanda, I'm discovering the opposite side of that, which is we are both equally as bad. And while I am very good at just sort of going, "No, it's fine, all right, and I can write anywhere, all right, over there," she goes to the opposite extreme of, "I can't write any music if there's somebody else in the house who could possibly be listening." And I'm going, "No, it's fine, I won't listen." She goes, "No, you don't understand, you have to go away." And once in Australia, I found myself thrown out onto the streets. She said, just go and hang out in that cafe. I'll be done soon. But okay. Down in the cafe. And then 11:30 happens, and they're sort of going, "Do you want anything else?" I'm going, "Oh, another cup of tea maybe?" I go, "Okay." Then midnight happens, and they go, "You have to go away now." Only they're Australian, so they're not saying it like that. It's much more, "Mate, haven't you got a home to go to?" You know, if you're dossing out there, you still got to get out of here, mate. We've got to close out. So, they close up. And now I'm going, "Oh, what do I do? Creep back up, knock on the door, and she's like, "What?" And they're like, "I can't actually, there isn't anywhere." She's like, "Come in and don't make a noise." And I sit down, and I check my email, and we're doing a gig the following day at the Sydney Opera House. And there's an email from the Sydney Opera House saying, "Excuse me about tomorrow's gig." And I say, "Oh, Sydney Opera House, when I know," and then I discovered what happens if you disturb an Amanda. Once you've been allowed in under sufferance. Never done that again. Now I would be out there walking the streets with those wallabies. I hope that helps.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Hang on, before you leave that, let me ask you, is there any way that any more sort of doors and things can be closed over there? Or just sort of cut down on anyone who have the power to close doors right over there and to sort of make things a little bit quieter? Because I would love to read something else, but I don't really want to do it while we're listening to them. Because I've written another book, and it comes out in September. And really, if you're going to be a good author, what you're meant to do, and I know there are studies on this, is you're meant to bring out one book a year, and it should be published at the same time every year. You should not fail to write an adult novel for 8 years just because you're not paying attention, and then bring out an adult book in June and a kid's book in September. This is wrong. So the kid's book, which is coming out in September, is called Fortunately the Milk. And On the one hand, you could view this as a book for children, and on the other hand, you could view it as a book for fathers. Because fathers, whatever father made that noise. Because fathers do not get enough love. See? Exactly. We do not. I myself wrote a book which, on cold consideration, could be considered fatherist. It was called The Day I Swapped My Dad for Two Goldfish. In it, a father who is reading his newspaper is traded by his son for some goldfish with a kid next door. He is traded, he goes off, he never notices. He is then traded for various other objects by various other kids. Eventually, the narrator has to go and get him back. He gets him back from a rabbit hutch where he's reading a newspaper and eating a carrot. And I thought that is a bad, evil depiction of fathers. People will read this book and they will think that fathers are unaware newspaper reading, somnolent, carrot-eating lumps of obliviousness. And I have to remedy that personally. So I have written a book in which a father does the kind of exciting, adventure-y things that fathers do. Specifically, namely, and to wit, he goes out to the shop on the corner to buy some milk for his children's cereal because they are out of milk. And I will begin the reading at the point where he comes back, having been out for some time. There was a thump and a bang at the front door, and my father came in. "Where have you been all this time?" said my sister. "Oh," said my father. "Oh, yes, well, funny you should ask me that." "You ran into someone you knew," I said, "and you lost track of time." "I bought the milk," said my father, "and I did indeed say a brief hello to Mr. Ronson from over the road who was buying a paper. I walked out at the corner shop and heard something odd that seemed to be coming from above me. It was a noise like this. Thump, thump. I looked up and I saw a huge silver disc hovering in the air above Marshall Road. "Hello," I said to myself. "That's not something you see every day." And then something odd happened. "That wasn't odd," I asked. "Well, something odder," said my father. "The odd thing was the beam of light that came out of the disc. A glittery, shimmery beam of light that was visible even in the daylight. And the next thing I knew, I was being sucked up into the disc. Fortunately, I put the milk into my coat pocket. The deck of the disc was metal. It was as big as a playing field, or bigger. "We have come to your planet from a world very far away," said the people in the disc. I call them people, but they were a bit green and rather globby, and they looked very grumpy indeed. "Now, as a representative of your species, we demand that you give us ownership of the whole planet. We are going to remodel it." "I jolly well won," I said. "Then," it said, "we will bring all your enemies here and have them make you miserable until you agree to sign the planet over to us." I was going to point out to them that I didn't have any enemies, when I noticed a large metal door with "Emergency exit, do not open for any reason, this means you" on it. I opened the door. "Don't do that," said a green globby person. "You'll let the space-time continuum in." But it was too late. I had already pushed open the door. I jumped. I was falling. Fortunately, I kept tight hold of the milk. So when I splashed into the sea, I didn't lose it. "What was that?" said a woman's voice. "A big fish? A mermaid? Or was it a spy?" I wanted to say that it wasn't any of those things, but my mouth was full of seawater. I felt myself being hauled up onto the deck of a little ship. There were a number of men and a woman on the deck, and they all looked very cross. "Who be ye, landlubber?" said the woman, who had a big hat on her head and a parrot on her shoulder. "He's a spy, a walrus in a coat, a new kind of mermaid with legs," said the man. "What are you doing here?" asked the woman. "Well," I said, "I just set out to the corner shop for some milk for my children's breakfast and for my tea, and the next thing I knew, 'He's lying, Your Majesty!' She pulled out her cutlass. "You dare lie to the Queen of the Pirates?" Fortunately, I kept tight hold of the milk. Now I pointed to it. "If I did not go to the corner shop to fetch the milk," I asked them, "then where did this milk come from?" At this, the pirates were completely speechless. "Now," I said, "if you could let me off somewhere near to my destination, I will be much obliged to you." "And where would that happen to be?" said the Queen of the Pirates. "On the corner of Marshall Road and Fletcher Lane," I said. "My children are waiting there for their breakfast." "You're on a pirate ship now, my fine bucko," said the Pirate Queen, "and you don't get dropped off anywhere. There are only two choices. You can join my pirate crew, or refuse to join, and we will slit your cowardly throat, and you will go to the bottom of the sea where you will feed the fishes." "What about walking the plank?" I asked. "Never heard of it," said the pirates. "Walking the plank," I said. "It's what proper pirates do. Look, I'll show you. Do you have a plank anywhere?" It took some looking, but we found a plank, and I showed the pirates where to put it. We discussed nailing it down, but the Pirate Queen decided it was safer just to have the two fattest pirates sit on the end of it. "Why exactly do you want to walk the plank?" asked the Pirate Queen. I edged out onto the plank. The blue Caribbean water splashed gently beneath me. "Well," I said, "I've seen lots of stories with pirates in them, and it seems to me that if I'm going to be rescued..." At this, the pirates started to laugh so hard, their stomachs wobbled, and the parrot took off into the air in amazement. "Rescue?" they said. "There's no rescue out here. We're in the middle of the sea." "Nevertheless," I told them, "if you're going to be rescued, it will always be while walking the plank." "Which we don't do," said the Pirate Queen. "Here, have a Spanish doubloon and come and join us in our piratical adventures. It's the 18th century," she added, "and there's always room for a bright, enthusiastic pirate." I caught the doubloon. "I almost wish that I could," I told her, "but I have children, and they need their breakfast." "Then you must die. Walk the plank." I edged out to the end of the plank. Sharks were circling. So were piranhas. And this was where I interrupted my dad for the first time. "Hang on," I said, "piranhas are a freshwater fish." What were they doing in the sea? "You're right," said my dad, "the piranhas were later." "Right, so..." I was out at the end of the plank, facing certain death, when a rope ladder hit my shoulder and a deep, booming voice shouted, "Quickly, climb up the rope ladder." I needed no more encouragement than this, and I grabbed the rope ladder with both hands. Fortunately, the milk was pushed deep into the pocket of my coat. The pirates hurled insults at me, and even discharged pistols, but neither insults nor pistol shot found their targets, and I soon made it to the top of the rope ladder. I'd never been in the basket of a hot air balloon before. It was very peaceful up there. The person in the balloon basket said, "I hope you don't mind me helping, but it looked like you were having problems down there." I said, "You're a stegosaurus." "I am an inventor," he said. "I have invented the thing we are traveling in, which I call Professor Steg's floaty ball person carrier. I call it a balloon." I said, "Professor Steg's floaty ball person carrier is the original name," he said. "And right now we are 150 million years in the future." "Actually," I said, "I think we're about 300 years in the past. Do you like hard, hairy, wet, white crunchers?" he asked. "Coconuts, I guess." "I named them first." He picked up a coconut from a basket and ate it shell and all, just as you or I might crunch toast. He showed me his time machine. He was very proud of it. It was a large cardboard box with several pebbles on it and stones stuck to the side. There was also a large red button. I looked at the stones. "Hang on," I said, "those are diamonds and sapphires and rubies." "Actually," he said, "I call them special shiny clear stones, special shiny bluey stones, and special shiny red stones," I suggested. "Indeed," he said, "I called them that when I was inventing my really good moves around in time machine 150 million years ago." "Well," I told him, "it was very lucky for me that you turned up when you did and rescued me. I'm slightly lost in space and time right now, and I need to get home in order to make sure my children get milk for their breakfast." I showed it to him. "This is the milk. Although I expect that 150 million years ago, you called it wet, white, drinky stuff." "Dinosaurs are reptiles, said Professor Steg. "We do not go in for milk." "Do you go in for breakfast cereal?" I asked. "Of course," he said. "Dinosaurs love breakfast cereal, especially the kind with nuts in." "What do you have on your cereal?" I asked. "Orange juice, mostly." "Oh, we just eat it dry, but I shall put this in my book. In the distant future, small mammals put milk on their breakfast cereal. I shall write a wonderful book when I return to the present." "Actually," I said, "I think this is definitely the past. It has pirates in." "It's the future," he said. "All the dinosaurs have gone off to the stars, leaving the world to mammals." "Oh, I wonder where you all went." I said, "The stars," he told me. "That is where we will have gone." "So," I said, "can you take me home?" "Well," he said, "yes. And no." "What does that mean?" "Yes, I would love to take you home. Nothing would make me happier." "No, I cannot take you home. In all honesty, I do not believe that I can take me home. My time machine is being temperamental. I need a special shiny greeny stone. I press that button many times, but nothing happens." "Button? Don't you mean big red flat pressy thing?" I asked. "I most certainly do not. It is a button. I named it after my aunt Button." I thank you. I will sign until my hand falls off for you all tonight, and then we'll continue signing with a disembodied, bleeding, bloody hand, doing it on its own. Thank you.
signing. You've been following the conversation with some of your friends tweeting. One of the Twitter addresses that we forgot to put up here is @BustersBB. In case you had any suggestions about the music that they put or the sound checking.